Do you have special interests, things that bring you joy and that you almost fixate on and want to learn all about? I do. Basically, all of us autistic people do. And probably my biggest special interest is music. I love it, and I always have. So I want to talk about it. And this will be the first installment because if I were to do a video that completely covered my musical special interests, it'd be way too long and would probably make YouTube servers go down. Hey everyone, this is Hunter. And in this video, I'm going to talk about my top 10 favorite albums. And I own all of these. And if you ask me, as far as sound, records are the best medium for music. So these are all going to be records that I own. You know, it's funny. I've always loved records since I was born, and I wasn't happy at all when CDs came along in the 80s and basically replaced records. Unlike most people, I kept right on playing records and never stopped. So I think it's hilarious that records are making a comeback and now they're outselling CDs. I love used record stores. I could go into one and spend hours in there. And I know this because I have. I've been to a lot of used record stores over the years, and there's a couple of them in Knoxville that I really like. Now, let me say that the albums that I'll be talking about here barely scratch the surface of albums that I love and that have special meaning to me. I mean, there's a bunch of them, hundreds. So, as far as albums, I'll be talking about the honorable mentions that didn't make this list when I make part two of this video. And I'm kind of anxious to talk about those albums too. Everybody likes music. And just like the title of this Billy Preston album, everybody likes some kind of music. So hopefully there'll be at least one or two on the following list that you would enjoy.
So why don't you get on with it? Here is a list of Hunter's top 10 albums.
Well,
So strap yourselves in, because once this nut gets to talking about records...
You know, Nigel, sometimes a man don't need a narrator, you know?
Whoopsie!
I have got to get a new staff. Knucklehead. This one is by George Shearing, and the title is My Ship. This is my favorite album, hands down. Mr. Shearing plays solo piano on this one, and it takes me to another world. When I listen to this album, the rest of the world doesn't exist for a little while, and I'm at total peace. There are some incredible arrangements and chord voicings and playing, and it was recorded so well. The sound is amazing. It was recorded in MPS studios in the German countryside in 1974. MPS Studios is still going, and I would love to visit if only I enjoyed traveling more than I do. This was recorded on a piano made by the company Bosendorfer. Everybody's heard of Steinway. Well, Bosendorfers are in the same league, if not higher. The actual Bosendorfer piano that was in the MPS studios is kind of legendary. It sounds really full and warm on this album. And another reason this album is special is because my dad got it for me years and years ago. And even back then, I knew it was special. Mr. Shearing was from England, and he was born blind. I own his autobiography, and it's interesting. And it was particularly interesting to hear his perspectives as someone who was blind and to read how he did things as a blind man. Now, that is my favorite album, but the rest of these are in no particular order. This is Maiden Voyage by Herbie Hancock. He's a jazz pianist, and it was released in 1966. I can safely say that this is considered one of the greatest jazz albums of all time. It has a bit of an ethereal quality to it. And even though I'm a huge jazz fan, you don't really have to be into jazz or be knowledgeable about jazz music to enjoy and appreciate this album. Now, I'm a big fan of Herbie Hancock. He started out as a jazz pianist, and later in the late 60s until the late 70s, he played R&B and funk and did some really cool stuff with his band, the Headhunters, in the mid 70s. I own Herbie's autobiography, and it's an interesting read. Here's the album Diamond Touch by George McCrae. I love this album. It's named Diamond Touch because the producer's name is Greg Diamond. And this one sounds phenomenal as a result. This album was released in 1976, and I have a 1976 Toshiba receiver connected to the turntable. And this record sounds so great on it. My experience seems to be that albums seem to sound the best on receivers that were made at the time of an album's release. This album is very quintessentially 70s sounding, and I consider that a good thing. This one is by jazz saxophonist Hank Mobley, and the title is Soul Station. It was recorded in 1960. I'm not always the biggest fan of saxophone, but early in his career, Hank Mobley had a nice, mellow way of playing without the harsh tone. And the songs are great, and it was wonderfully recorded and just sounds great. The biggest reason I love this album is because of the fabulous Wynton Kelly on piano. He was something else, and I particularly like his solo on the first track, which is called Remember. My copy of this album is a recent reissue by Blue Note Records. Blue Note Records is a legendary jazz record label, and they are selling brand new copies of their classic records. And these are all analog, just like when they were originally released. There's nothing digital about them. They're mastered and cut directly from the original tapes, and boy, do they sound great. Now, something else that's interesting about this album is that it was recorded in the producer's living room. The producer, Rudy Van Gelder, lived in a house that had a studio built in the living room. And I always think it's really cool when listening to these records that were recorded in that house to think of what it must have been like to be in that house and have these wonderful musicians giving a concert right there in the living room. Okay, now these two are a tie. These are by the Carpenters. The album Close to You and the album A Song for You. The Carpenters were amazing. Richard was an incredible arranger, songwriter, and producer, and quite a musician. And then, of course, you have Karen, who is essentially a legend. No other singer sounds like her. When she and Richard do the multi-track layered harmonies, it's pretty magical. I read that Karen always held the microphone close to her mouth, and that when she sang without a microphone, you could barely even hear her. It was almost like a whisper. And if you watch any of their live performances, you can see how close she holds the microphone to her mouth, and sometimes it's even touching her face. Yeah, I have a really soft spot in my heart for Karen. I think she was very beautiful, especially before she developed her eating disorder. And she was an excellent drummer, and she wanted to play drums and sing, but she was pushed out front for marketing reasons. And that's one of the things that led to her being self-conscious about her appearance, although again, she was beautiful. The Close to You record here was my parents, and I heard it a lot growing up, and they're impeccably recorded. Goodbye to Love, a song which is on A Song for You, has what might be my favorite guitar solo of all time at the end of the song. I have a biography of Karen, and it's definitely an interesting read. And I also have this very nice picture coffee table book of the Carpenters. Oh, here we have Night Train by the Oscar Peterson Trio. This is one cool album. It's from 1963. The opening song, Night Train, and the closing song, Hymn to Freedom, are the perfect way to open and close an album. Mr. Peterson's playing is really great here. He composed Hymn to Freedom, a great song that was a tribute to people struggling for civil rights in the early 60s. I really like the way this one was recorded. The piano sounds warm and full. And I love to listen to this album when I work out. And Mr. Peterson was a virtuoso for sure. His hands just glided up and down the keyboard. When he told his dad that he wanted to be a jazz pianist, his dad said, "Oh, that's okay on one condition, that he become the best darn jazz pianist there was." And many would say that he succeeded. I have Oscar Peterson's autobiography, and it's a good one. This is a 3 record box set from 1973 by pianist Keith Jarrett, and it's called Solo Concerts, Bremen Lausanne. In these concerts, he plays solo piano and improvised everything on the spot, having no idea ahead of time what he was going to play. And this was impeccably recorded. Every album by the German ECM record label just sounded great. And he was a superhero on the piano, and he played the smoothest, most impossible sounding lines. You hear them and you're wondering, how in the heck did he do that? And he could play anything: jazz, classical, gospel, trance, you name it. And he just mixed it all together into one awesome creation. And Keith is probably my biggest musical influence and inspiration. And he influenced countless number of other musicians. He lived and breathed piano. He was composing music when he was still a toddler. And he used to sleep under his family's piano. He was so attached to it. I have 2 Keith Jarrett biographies, and they are fascinating reading. This is It's My Pleasure by Billy Preston. Now, Billy was somebody who had music flowing through his veins. He was a monster on the Hammond organ. I read that someone once called him the Jimi Hendrix of the Hammond organ, and I would say that's pretty accurate. And he was pretty darn great on piano and clavinet and the electric piano too. And he was the one who played that great electric piano solo on the song Get Back by the Beatles. This album came out in 1975, and it sounds really incredible on my 1976 stereo receiver. And it was produced by Robert Margouleff and Malcolm Cecil, and they produced several of Stevie Wonder's early to mid 70s albums. So, of course, this one sounds great. And the songs are great. It had no hits, and most people haven't heard of it, but I think it is by far his best album in terms of the songs and in terms of the recording. And it came with this great poster. Here is another tie. The 2 albums are The Kicker by jazz vibraphonist Bobby Hutcherson and Idle Moments by jazz guitarist Grant Green. Both albums had the exact same musicians on them, and they were recorded 1 month apart. in 1963. Bobby and Grant both play wonderfully, and pianist Dick Pearson and saxophonist Joe Henderson do as well. Now, I used to not be a fan of the vibraphone, but I changed my mind years ago. Vibraphone players are amazing. The way they glide up and down the instrument and play such smooth, fluid lines. And the tone bars are laid out exactly like a piano keyboard. So, as a pianist myself, I can tell when a vibes player is hitting B flat, for instance, because where he's hitting on his instrument is right where B flat is on the piano keyboard. And Bobby Hutcherson was one of the greats, and he was a great vibraphonist, as was Milt Jackson, Lionel Hampton, and Gary Burton. The title track on Idle Moments is about 14 minutes long, and it's the very definition of mellow. I don't always like the saxophone, but the way Joe Henderson plays it on that title track is really something else. Next on the list is Everybody Digs Bill Evans by jazz pianist Bill Evans. It was released in 1959. This is Bill playing in a trio, and this is pretty incredible stuff. Bill had a fabulous touch and an incredible technique. After he graduated with a degree in music, he spent a couple of years basically hyper-focusing on improving his piano playing and technique. Just playing and learning all day and night inside his apartment. And he got results. Kind of Blue by Miles Davis is perhaps the most famous jazz album of all time, and Bill played on it and was very influential in the sound and arrangements of that album. But Everybody Digs Bill Evans is really great. There's a wonderful improvised song on this album called Peace Piece, Peace space Piece, Peace Piece. And it's a classic. And it's totally improvised. If I'm not mistaken, Bill didn't even know that he was being recorded when he played it, which might be why it's so good. I don't own an original pressing of this album because I'm not a millionaire. I own a reissue from the 70s with a different cover called Peace Piece and Other Pieces. Bill was an enormous influence on other pianists, including Keith Jarrett. I own a biography of Bill Evans, and it's a good read. Well, there you have it. Let me just say that I can't wait to talk about all the honorable mentions that didn't quite make this list. Aren't special interests wonderful? Don't they help us? I know that for me, when I was growing up, things at school and my home life weren't always good. But when I entered the world of my special interests, I didn't care if the rest of the world wasn't good, at least for a little while. The special interests were a healthy escape that helped me to feel safe and happy in my own way. And I've had a lot more special interests other than just music. And here are some of them: football, baseball, and basketball cards, Star Wars cards, Battlestar Galactica cards, and Superman cards. The Rockford Files TV show, classic monster movies, my Swedish ancestry. In fact, I have the original immigration documents from my great-grandfather and the wooden chest that he brought over with him from Sweden. Boxing was a special interest. Classic pro wrestling from the 60s and 70s.
And perhaps the biggest special interest Hunter had growing up was comic books. His favorite character of all is Captain America.
He also likes Superman, the Man of Steel. And he is a big fan of Jim Starlin, especially his work on Warlock and Captain Marvel.
Just for once, it would be nice to do this without interruptions. I studied theatre under Strasbourg.
Oh, kiss my grits, Nige.
And classic cars. among other things. I'm still interested in these things, and in future installments about my special interests, I'll talk about them too. Well, thank you for hanging out with me for a little while. I sure do appreciate it. Yeah, come on back anytime. Are there any albums that are your favorites? I'd love to hear about it because you're special and you're interesting. I appreciate all of you, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Have a great day.